Recently, the Venezuelan election triggered a nationwide protest that has intensified. Even the local military and police have joined the demonstrations, and protesters have occupied the capital's airport. So far, 16 people have died, and 749 have been arrested. On August 1st, the U.S. issued an official statement recognizing opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez as the winner of the Venezuelan presidential election. On the other hand, Chinese President Xi Jinping called to congratulate Maduro on his re-election as Venezuelan president. This election has attracted worldwide attention and has particularly touched the nerves of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. If this country changes drastically, the CCP will not only lose one of its few friends, but it will also likely not be able to recover more than $100 billion in credit and investment. On the other hand, Venezuela's economy has regressed for 20 years just because of its closeness to the CCP. How did all this happen, and where will it go? In this episode, we will explore this issue. On July 28th, Venezuela held a presidential election. After the voting ended, the incumbent president, Maduro, declared himself the winner with 51% of the votes. The opposition candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, received 44% of the votes. On July 29th, Venezuela's opposition coalition questioned Maduro's victory. They said more than 73% of the votes had been counted, showing Gonzalez had received more than 6 million votes, while Maduro had only received 2.7 million. On July 30th, the public protested in the streets after discovering election fraud. Opposition leader Maria Corina Machado announced Edmundo Gonzalez as the new president of Venezuela during a rally. Maduro's troops then began to suppress the crowd and fired tear gas to drive them away.
No, la bomba está aquí mismo.
On the same day, the incident led to the current president, Maduro, issuing an arrest warrant for opposition leader Machado and other related persons. Former Vice Prosecutor of the National Assembly of Venezuela, Freddy Superlano, was also kidnapped. At the same time, protests across the country intensified, with people toppling Maduro's portraits and burning his giant propaganda banners. They also splashed ink on the portraits of former President Chavez and toppled his statues. A 15-year-old boy was killed during the event. His little sister said the National Guard shot him at close range. He was later buried with a funeral procession carrying his coffin from his home while people held wreaths, flowers, and banners, crying and singing the Venezuelan national anthem. They shot him at close range. The bullet was directed at him. It was not a lost bullet. I don't know why they shot my brother. My brother didn't do anything, and my brother was passing by. He stopped to see what the protest was about, but wasn't participating. My brother was coming back from a quinceañera rehearsal. My brother was just a child, and he was only 15. This didn't have to happen to him. Honestly, it's very unfair, and I don't know why they did it. In addition to the escalation of protests within Venezuela, Venezuelans living in Argentina, Mexico, and Chile also took to the streets to protest, demanding transparency and fairness in their country's election results. In the following video, protesters gathered outside the Venezuelan embassy in Buenos Aires, Argentina's capital, waving flags and holding a sign that reads, "Everyone knows this is a scam." Let it be demonstrated that we want democracy and are tired of living like this. That is what we want, freedom and respect for human rights. People are starving and dying for lack of medical attention, and it's not fair. It is unfair that such a rich country is going through all this. We are reasonable people. We, the good ones, are more numerous. In Santiago, the capital of Chile, Venezuelans gathered in the west of the city to protest against the unfair election, insisting that Maduro should not have been elected. We are here protesting peacefully and showing the world that in every country where there is a Venezuelan, we are unhappy about the situation in Venezuela. They are attacking the people, the opposition witnesses who were in the voting centers. They are attacking all the political leaders. Venezuelans living in Mexico City also protested in front of the iconic Angel of Independence monument, chanting slogans and calling for international intervention to preserve democracy in Venezuela. The hope, faith, and desire for the return of democracy remain alive. We are following all the instructions of the national leadership because we want to recover the country and return home. That is what is in the heart of every Venezuelan. Here is a look at how the world reacted to the Venezuelan election. On July 30th, the White House said that President Biden and Brazilian President da Silva agreed in a phone call that day that Venezuelan election authorities must immediately release complete, transparent, and detailed voting data from polling stations. National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby also said that the U.S. and the international community are paying close attention to this and will respond accordingly.
I want to note that our patience and that of the international community is running out. It's running out on waiting for the Venezuelan electoral authorities to come clean and release the full detailed data on this election so that everyone can see the results. You may have seen the Carter Center, an independent observer, just earlier this morning released a report stating that, quote, Venezuela's 2024 presidential election did not meet international standards of electoral integrity and cannot be considered democratic. They concluded that the, quote, electoral authorities' failure to announce disaggregated results by polling station constitutes a serious breach of electoral principles.
On July 31st, the Organization of American States, OAS, met in Washington, and diplomats from across the Americas expressed strong opinions on the Venezuelan election. They could not recognize the results of Venezuela's National Election Council declaring President Maduro the winner of the disputed vote. On the same day, Argentina, Chile, Costa Rica, Peru, Panama, the Dominican Republic, and Uruguay signed a joint statement calling for a thorough review of the Venezuelan election results. Venezuela then announced that it would sever diplomatic ties with these countries. On the other hand, Maduro's victory was supported by China, Russia, and some left-leaning Latin American countries. Chinese President Xi Jinping sent a message to congratulate Maduro on his re-election as Venezuelan president. A spokesperson for the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs also said that China and Venezuela are good friends and partners who support each other. China congratulates Venezuela for smoothly holding the presidential election and congratulates President Nicolas Maduro for his re-election. China and Venezuela are good friends and partners supporting each other. This year marks the 50th anniversary of establishing a diplomatic relationship between China and Venezuela. China attaches great importance to its relations with Venezuela and is ready to work with Venezuela to continuously enrich the connotation of the China-Venezuela all-weather strategic partnership and better benefit the people of the two countries. On August 1st, the U.S. government publicly announced that opposition presidential candidate Edmundo Gonzalez had won the election. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, "The Maduro-controlled National Election Council declared Maduro the winner without any supporting evidence, making the results it announced untrustworthy." At the same time, the opposition released more than 80% of the vote counts received directly from polling stations across Venezuela, which showed that Edmundo Gonzalez won the election with the most votes. This is consistent with the exit polls and quick counts on election day, and independent observers also confirmed these facts. On the same day, the foreign ministers of the Group of Seven, including the foreign ministers of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the UK, and the US, as well as the senior representative of the European Union, issued a joint statement expressing solidarity with the Venezuelan people. The statement said, "We call on the relevant representatives to publish detailed election results transparently. We ask the election representatives to share all information with the opposition and independent observers immediately. The election results must reflect the will of the Venezuelan people." So why did Venezuela go from rich to poor? What is the deep connection between Venezuela and China? As we all know, Venezuela was once a prosperous country, ranking first in the world in terms of oil reserves and fourth in terms of GDP per capita. On February 2, 1999, Chavez was officially elected the 53rd president of Venezuela. After taking office, he implemented a reform measure called the Bolivarian Revolution. At the end of 2004, he also proposed building 21st century socialism. The core uses oil exports and foreign debt to promote egalitarianism, free medical care, education, and public housing systems. Since then, Venezuela has embarked on the road to socialism. After Chavez's death, the current president, Maduro, continued to implement Chavez's policies, and the country moved further toward a dictatorship. The result was a near economic collapse. According to the International Monetary Fund, by 2014, Venezuela had begun to fall into an economic recession. In 2016, Venezuela's inflation rate reached 800%. Due to the continuous deterioration of the economy, and by the end of 2018, Venezuela's inflation rate reached 1,000,000%, and by 2019, the market inflation rate reached 2,000,000%. Due to the long-term shortage of daily necessities, people have been hungry for a long time. More than 80% of the citizens are malnourished, the child mortality rate is rising, and the crime rate ranks first in the world. Many Venezuelans have fled the country to make a living. According to the International Organization for Migration's 2019 estimate, since 2014, 3 million people have immigrated abroad, accounting for about 10% of the Venezuelan population. Now, let's discuss the bilateral relationship between Venezuela and China, in which China has invested hundreds of billions but lost all its money. China established diplomatic relations with Venezuela in 1974. The trade between the two countries was only US $500 million before 1999, but it reached US $7.5 billion in 2009 and rose to US $13.89 billion in 2014. China imported US $9.45 billion and Venezuela imported US $4.44 billion. China mainly exports electrical appliances, computers, electronic products, machinery, and equipment, and primarily imports crude oil, refined oil, iron ore, and concentrates. Thus, China has become Venezuela's second-largest trading partner and most important investment destination in Latin America. At the same time, Venezuela exports oil and other resources to China. Since the end of January 2019, when the US announced sanctions against Venezuela's state-owned oil companies, China had been the leading importer of Venezuelan crude oil. By the first half of 2019, China imported 8.67 million tons of Venezuelan crude oil, accounting for about 3.5% of China's total crude oil imports. Later, Venezuela was in crisis and they repeatedly sought assistance from China. According to statistics from the Financial Times, China provided Venezuela with about $125 billion in loans in the years from 2002 to 2016. China has become an essential overseas economic lifeline for Venezuela, providing loans secured by oil and conducting transactions through their contracts and investments. Moreover, the Chinese government has promoted many Chinese enterprises, state-owned enterprises, and private enterprises in Venezuela. According to data from the Chinese Ministry of Commerce, since 2012, Venezuela has become the country in Latin America with the most Chinese investment, reaching $2.04 billion, while in 2011 it was only $500 million. But Chavez's big pot proved to be a mess. Resources are a curse for Venezuela. The greater curse is high welfare. After Chavez's death and the decline in oil prices, Venezuela could neither fulfill its debt principles nor maintain its promise to continue exporting oil to China. As a result, China's accumulated investment of US $125 billion in Venezuela has been lost. According to estimates by Shewin Zhe, a researcher at the Institute of Latin American Studies of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, almost all companies that were not included in the bilateral cooperation projects have withdrawn, and the total loss is estimated to be between US $3 billion and US $5 billion. Venezuela is an enemy of the US and is on the side of dictatorships. According to the Epoch Times, former President Chavez idolized Mao Zedong. Matt Furchin, associate professor at the School of International Relations at Tsinghua University, said, Chavez's goal is obvious, to unite with China as a socialist comrade and at the same time to reduce Venezuela's long-standing dependence on the US for oil exports. Since Chavez was elected president of Venezuela, he's been making anti-American speeches on television, not missing any opportunity to attack the United States. thus bringing the US and Venezuela into a state of hostility. For this reason, Chavez himself has also been dubbed the anti-American pioneer. Faced with the domestic crisis caused by this election, the current president, Maduro, also publicly declared that the US is a liar. The United States, with its false diplomacy, moved around the world to set up this scenario in Venezuela. I have to say it all. We negotiated with the US in good faith and they did not comply. They are liars and phonies. They have no word even when they sign an agreement. They were taking advantage of the negotiations to distract us. Chavez's foreign policy is to be hostile to the US and to ally with dictatorships. Venezuela's friendly allies mainly include Cuba, Iran, China, Zimbabwe, and North Korea. The Chinese government also hopes to use the anti-American Maduro regime to leave a socialist country in the backyard of the US. When Maduro arrived in Beijing on September 12, 2018, he told the media that China was like Venezuela's big brother and had high expectations for further deepening their relationship. On September 13, 2023, Maduro and Chinese President Xi Jinping jointly announced during his visit to China that the relationship between the two countries is an all-weather strategic partnership. The so-called all-weather strategic partnership level is the highest level of China's diplomatic relations with other countries. Only a few countries such as Pakistan, Russia, and Belarus have the right to enjoy this treatment.
¡A un maldito!